Hello ladies and gentlemen and welcome to a reaction video to the F1 2021 Monza Grand Prix. I haven't done one of these for a while because, to be honest with you, I've not seen a big enough point to react to. I'm only doing them when I feel there's something that needs to be mentioned or something to be spoke about. This time, it's definitely something to be spoke about. Now, if you guys have watched the race, you know what happened. You know that this team here, which is obviously in reverse camera, what can you do? McLaren, Mercedes, back on the top step of the Grand Prix, back on the top step of that podium with Daniel Ricciardo. Now that is amazing to see. Danny Ricciardo hasn't won a race since 2018, I believe, Monaco Grand Prix. And McLaren have not been 1-2 since 2010, I believe it was mentioned, which is a long time ago. I think it might have been Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton, actually, if I remember rightly. If I'm wrong, somebody will correct me in the comments. You know, they love to do that. Obviously, ignore the hat. That's on because my hair is a complete blooming mess and I need to get it cut. But, is what it is. We'll ignore that. We'll go over that for now. Now, we'll start from the beginning of the race, where Lewis Hamilton, I think, started fourth. We had Daniel Ricciardo in second and Max Verstappen on pole with Lando Norris in third place. I believe that's how it lined up. But going to the line, it looked like Ricciardo got a much better launch than the Red Bull, which has been struggling around Monza. I forgot where we were there for a second. Considering they managed to get a P2 in the sprint race, which was quite amazing. Obviously, the sprint race set the order for the actual race. So Hamilton actually finished in fifth, but because Bottas won the race, had to start at the back due to all his engine penalties and all that. So yeah, that was how that started. So Ricciardo got an amazing launch, managed to get himself into P1, into the first turn, which then forced Verstappen a little bit wide, made him vulnerable to Lewis Hamilton, who got a very good start and managed to get past Lando Norris into the first couple of corners. Then going in around, I think it's Curva Grande, going into the second chicane, which I can't remember the name of, but turn 4, Lewis Hamilton had a lovely run on Verstappen, went for a move, tried to go, I think, around the outside of turn 4, and Verstappen, to be honest, quite rightly, opened the steering just a tiny bit because he was on the racing line. He had the corner and Lewis kind of had to back out no matter what. So Lewis had to back out, go across the curb, which then opened opportunity for Lando Norris to then have a go at him. And all this was opening the gap to Danny Ricciardo at the top. So he was just getting away. And then you had Lando get past Lewis Hamilton. So it got a bit bunched up, and then all of a sudden, you had a group of two. You had Ricciardo and Verstappen. Verstappen was following Ricciardo very closely. Then you had Norris with Hamilton, who was following him very closely. But neither of them were able to make an overtake because the track was quite difficult to pass for some reason today. The DRS zones were not that powerful. And then you had, obviously, the other thing that I didn't mention was Lewis Hamilton starting on the hard tyres because he was going for the alternate strategy. Everybody else on the soft on the medium compound to start the race. You had Bottas starting on the hards as well, but he was starting down in 19th place, or 18th actually, because you had Gasly who retired after a couple laps after starting in the pit lane. And you had Tsunoda, the other AlphaTauri, who did not even get off the line. Had some sort of problem with, I don't know, brakes or engine, they said. It was something. So neither of them actually got to start the race. And then you had the situation where Bottas was just battling his way through the field. He was just taking cars bit by bit by bit. And he slowly made himself up into the points. And he was racing really well, to be honest with you. And he was doing a cracking job. He started on the hards, obviously. But then you had the first round of pit stops. Now, this is where the chaos begins. So, Ricciardo comes in first, gets a pit stop. It was, I think it was quite a routine stop. Then the following lap, because Verstappen was losing time on the next lap, so the undercut for Ricciardo looked like it was going to work. Verstappen was losing loads and loads of time, and it came around to do his pit stop. All looked routine at first. Then there must have been a bolt tightening problem or something. But what caused Verstappen to have an 11.1 second pit stop was amazing. I don't really know what the problem was, but it caused him to have an 11.1 second pit stop, which then forced him behind Lando Norris. He would have been behind Lewis Hamilton as well. But then we get to Lewis Hamilton's pit stop. I think it was about 5 or 6 laps later, because it might have even been more actually. But Lewis Hamilton started on the hard tyres, then pitted across to the mediums. I believe he came in on lap 30 or something. So he came in to pit for the medium tyres, hoping to go to the end with a little bit more speed. But then he had a 4.2 second, I believe, pit stop, which then forced him behind the McLarens, because the McLarens both pitted before him because they were on the medium tyres. And then it just opened the opportunity. Lewis would have been coming out in P1 without his slow pit stop. So he ends up having that slow pit stop. But then the thing we didn't know at the time, that slow pit stop put him behind Lando and Ricciardo, but it also put him in the clutches of Max Verstappen just about. So as Lewis is coming out of the pits, he knew he was behind Lando Norris, so he just kind of sat there. Or it might have been Daniel Ricciardo at the time. I can't remember. It was one of the papaya McLarens. So he was behind that car. Then you had Verstappen coming down the pit straight. Now, he was on warm, hard tyres, so he was going to go for it. Lewis on the cold, medium compound. So, we're going into turn 1. Obviously, already lost the position to McLaren, Lewis Hamilton did. Then you had Max Verstappen tried to just roll it around the outside of Lewis into turn 1 on those tyres. So, going around the outside, he's there on the outside, just, I think, a tiny bit behind Lewis. But then Lewis just decides to give literally only enough for one car. So Max has to perfectly place his car. And the problem with that is you got those sausage curbs on turns 1 and turns 2. So Max Verstappen tries to hold it there, but then he just runs out of room, has nowhere to go, gets up on that sausage curb, which aerially flies his car, which you'll see on the thumbnail. So he was flying through the air, had nowhere to go, ends up on top of Lewis Hamilton's car, which Lewis is then saved with his halo. Lewis's halo saves him today, which is, I was getting attacked by my cat there, that's really helpful, which is quite, it's the advocate for the reason that they're there. It's showing the reason they're there. Because without that halo, Lewis would have been in a lot of trouble, because he has the whole car bounce off the top of the halo, of the Red Bull car bouncing off the top of the halo. And luckily, it just hits that, slightly brushes his helmet. I think his helmet got damaged. And Lewis mentions after the race that he was a little bit of neck pain. But luckily for him and for us as well, that there was no serious injury to either driver. Just a bit of, I would say, a bit of bruising. But yeah, it is what it is. But I would say it probably goes down as a racing incident. Obviously, they're reviewing it. It was, it could have been avoided, to be honest, if Max Verstappen did what Lewis did earlier in the race and just goes across the inside of the corner. But the thing is, with that, if he does that, he gives up the position. He basically gives up the race. So he tried his very best to hold it there, which then obviously, it's caused this major crash. So both the championship rivals DNF from the race, which did bring out a safety car, which gave Bottas a chance to go in and pit off for the mediums. Everybody else pitted for their first pit stop, I think, a lot of drivers. And then we just had a neutralised race for a few laps, where Daniel Ricciardo perfectly times his restart and manages to get away at the front with his teammate Lando Norris there, sat in P2, defends a little bit from, at the time, I believe, Perez, who prior to that picked up a 5-second time penalty. Actually, I think he did that on the safety car restart. Picks up a 5-second time penalty for an overtake on the Ferrari, where he was off the track when he actually passed him, which is Obviously, everybody knows you're gaining an advantage. You pass somebody off the track, you have to give it back. For the second race this season, Perez decides not to give it back and gives himself a 5-second time penalty. I'm not really sure what he was thinking, but he does it again. And he now needs to look into that for future races because it's now cost him another podium. Because he was in P3, you had the two McLarens, Ricciardo and Norris, 1-2. So he was sat in P3 there, Perez, defending from the high-flying fin of Valtteri Bottas, who passed the two Ferraris prior. And it was absolutely on it, on the better compound, fresh compound, and he was flying. Couldn't go any faster, to be honest with you. And he was just doing everything in his power. If he got past Perez, he could have won this Grand Prix. But luckily for McLaren, for everybody in the Papaya team, they managed to hold on. You get Ricciardo P1, Norris P2, Bottas from 19th or 18th technically on the grid into P3. And then I believe it was, Leclerc P4. I believe Perez slots into P5 in between the two Ferraris where Carlos Sainz gets P6. What a race we've just witnessed. Very eventful, very, controversial considering the incident. But that will be left for the stewards to decide. Obviously, if either driver does get a penalty, it will be a grid penalty for the next Grand Prix. My opinion, race and incident. If it was to go either way, I would potentially say, look, well, they've both got a point, to be honest. Lewis has got a point where Max should have took the runoff. Just turn left a bit more. But obviously, in the moment, it's a bit difficult. Max Verstappen's got a point where Lewis Hamilton should have given him a little bit more space, considering he knows those sausage cubs are on the inside. And he probably knows Max wouldn't give up the position very easily. So, my opinion, race and incident. Everyone in the comments, you may have a different opinion. But race and incident for me, and a very entertaining race. And very happy to see McLaren on the top step. And the second step as well. Amazing performance. Hopefully they can build on that for future races. And Tifoso not getting their performance that they would want from the Ferraris. But I think 4th and 6th place isn't too bad for the Ferrari cars at the moment. So yeah, not too bad. Really enjoyable race. Much better than the Belgium Grand Prix we had a few weeks ago, which was absolutely ridiculous. It was a crazy race, the Belgium one, because it just didn't happen, did it? It should have happened, but it just didn't happen, unfortunately. But we're talking about the Monza Grand Prix. A very entertaining race. We are now looking forward to the next Grand Prix, which, to be honest with you, I have no idea what it is. The calendar's everywhere. I don't know what our next race is, but I'm sure it'll be an entertaining one either way. The 5-point gap remains between the two cars. We'll see which one, or if either gets a penalty. I doubt either's going to get one. But I hope you've enjoyed watching my reaction to this one. Obviously, normally I would do a reaction. I'm out and about. I've done this immediately after the race. And main reason for that is the football's on in a minute. Liverpool playing. So, can't really go anywhere. But I hope you guys have enjoyed. I've been Chris12 LFC. And I will see you later.